We recently looked at the 10 best win-win trades in the NBA. Well, now we need to look at the other side of that and see the 10 trades that instantly made a team worse. A couple quick rules though. We're not including trades that were done because the team wanted to go straight into a rebuild, and no trades because the star demanded a trade. We're basically trying to limit it to trades that teams expected to be great, but then they actually turned out terrible. A great example was when the Phoenix Suns chose to trade Jason Kidd in exchange for Stephon Marbury. And this was an odd one. In the Suns' last season with Jason Kidd, Phoenix finished with a 51-31 record. Well, the season Stephon got there, that was bumped down to 36-46. 15 less wins evens out to about a 20% decline just from one player. While incredibly, the Nets jumped from 26-56 to 52 wins and making the NBA Finals. So why would Phoenix make this trade? Well, there was a few factors. Jason had played there for 4 seasons, and in those 4 years he was able to lead them to 50 plus wins 3 times. And they made the playoffs every single year but could barely make it out of the first round. And thanks to being a first round team and their play style, Suns ticket sales had declined every year. So with that on top of Kidd's off-court issues from earlier in the season, the team felt like it was time to move on. And with this trade, they hoped it would be a win for both sides. But what were they thinking trading for a guy who had never made the playoffs and was known for his off-court issues? So they kinda deserved this one. Another deal that instantly made a team worse involved the LA Clippers and the New Orleans Hornets. And it was when Chris Paul was ready to be traded. And the deal that eventually ended up going through was Chris Paul to the Clippers in exchange for a rookie Al-Farouq Aminu, a 22-year-old Eric Gordon, a prime Chris Kaman, and a first-round pick. Now obviously the Hornets weren't expected to have the same success, but they were expected to at least compete. I mean, Eric Gordon was averaging 22 points a game at the time and thought to be a future star. So him and Chris Kaman were supposed to make things work while also getting future assets for the team, but that's not what happened. In CP3's last season there, the team won 46 games, and in the first season after the trade, they dropped way down to 21 wins, and continued on that same pace for years, with them not being a real threat until just recently these days. At the time, New Orleans thought they were making a good move for their future, but it turned out to be one of the worst trades of all time. And speaking of point guards in terrible trades, a little more recently we saw Russell Westbrook get sent to the Lakers in a trade that instantly made the team worse. You see, as you'll remember, Russ was bouncing around the league, but just put up a 20-point triple-double on the season for Washington. So the Lakers traded KCP, Montrezl Harrell, and Kyle Kuzma for him. Well, before the trade, LA finished with a 42-30 record, which was a 60% win season. And with him, they finished 33-49, which meant they only won about 40% of their games. So that was a huge drop that injuries didn't play a part in. But I will say LA did lose a couple of key guys the season Russ came in. But they still had a good roster. But I don't need to do any convincing, we all know how bad that season was for the Lakers. A similar scenario did just play out right before our eyes just a matter of weeks ago, when the Mavericks traded for Kyrie Irving. This season before Kyrie Irving got to Dallas, they were on pace for about a 500 record, a number that may or may not have led them into the playoffs. And with that doubt in mind, Mark Cuban and the Mavs had to do something quick. So when Kyrie requested a trade, they jumped on it, trading Spencer Dinwiddie, Dorian Finney-Smith, a first-round pick, and 2 second-rounders for him. Well, due to both himself and Luka sitting out back and forth and their inability to succeed together, things went terribly. This season before the deal, the Mavs were 31-32 on the year. Well, with Kyrie on the team, they were at just an 8-19 record, and only 3-8 when both Irving and Luka played together. And now there's no doubt that Kyrie Irving will leave the team in free agency this offseason. So they trade all of these assets just to miss the playoffs for 1 year. While on the other hand, both the Nuggets and Pistons basically had a straight up player for player trade when Detroit sent Chauncey Billups away to bring in Allen Iverson. The idea was that the Pistons still had their core from their championship team, but they had become stagnant and thought that bringing in a player and a playmaker like Allen Iverson would take them back to that next level. But that backfired because in 2007 with Billups, Detroit had 59 wins on the year and took the Celtics to 6 games in the Eastern Conference Finals. Well, then the trade goes down and the next season is a disaster because the team now finished with 39 wins and got swept in the first round. Other moves could have been made, but obviously trading the leader of the team for a star way past his prime wasn't gonna do the trick. Now at the beginning of this year, I was convinced that DeJounte Murray getting sent to the Atlanta Hawks was gonna be a great thing. So the trade of Danilo Gallinari and 3 first-round picks seemed worth it, because with Trey's offense, DeJounte's defense, and the playmaking from both guys, I didn't see anything that could have gone wrong. And I didn't see coming what happened next, which was them finishing with almost the exact same record as they had last year. With DeJounte, they won 2 less games in the regular season, and I don't see them doing any better in the playoffs this year, especially when they're going up against the Boston Celtics. Atlanta barely made any other roster changes, so it's strange to realize that adding a player like Murray actually did nothing at all. And now they only have 1 more full season together before he's a free agent. And if they end up losing him, it means they're going to be without a first round pick for a long time for no reason. Another trade that had a similar effect this season season and instantly made the team worse was trading Rudy Gobert to the Timberwolves. The Jazz gave up Patrick Beverley, Malik Beasley, Leandro Balmero, Jared Vanderbilt, Walker Kessler, and 4 first-round picks to bring in Rudy. And this is an all-in trade. Making a deal like this means that you're expecting an NBA championship on the other side of it. Well, the fact that this team's record barely changed and he punched his teammate and put their entire season in jeopardy means that the team overall stayed at about the same level and now have so many less assets going forward, which makes them an overall much worse team. They just give away way too many picks for a guy that's never going to be an all-star in his career again. Sure, the Wolves had to deal with the Karl Anthony Towns being out for most of the year, which did contribute to their record not being great, but even then I'm still not considering this a good trade. And you see, big men getting traded always seems like a risky move based on NBA history, even dating back to Wilt Chamberlain, because at one point Wilt was playing for the 76ers, and when his contract was up and he refused to sign a new one, Philly knew that they had no choice but to trade him. And the deal they made turns out to be one of the worst in NBA history. It was Wilt Chamberlain for Jerry Chambers, Archie Clark, and Darrell Imhoff. Yeah, if you've never heard any of those guys, you're not alone. None of these 3 guys averaged over 13 points per game the next season, so them getting traded for the guy that was the MVP the previous 3 years in a row, it was no surprise that Philly's record dropped from 62-20 to 42-40 just 2 years later. Exactly how and why this trade happened, I have no idea. Just like I still am not sure why the Orlando Magic traded Victor Oladipo and Domantas Sabonis for Serge Ibaka. On paper, the Magic didn't get dramatically worse or anything after the deal, but obviously it affected themselves and their future for years going forward. They would have been a lot better just a few years down the line had this not have went down. Plus, the fact that Serge only played 56 games for them before leaving makes things that much worse. There was another big man deal that went down that instantly made, you guessed it, the Minnesota Timberwolves a much worse team, and they still didn't learn their lesson. And that was sending Kevin Garnett to Boston in exchange for Ryan Gomes, Gerald Green, Theo Ratliff, Al Jefferson, and 2 first-round picks. With the 23-year-old Jefferson being the centerpiece of this deal, seeing that he was still young and thought to be the league's next dominant big man. Even before this deal went down though, the Timberwolves were already pretty terrible, even with the former league MVP finishing with a 32-50 record. So when the move went down, things couldn't have gotten that much worse. These 5 guys wouldn't have had to do much to make it seem like it was a fair deal both ways. Instead, they dropped down to a 22-60 record now. Al Jefferson did his thing and stepped up, but everyone else struggled. And it's not just on the players, because the Wolves infamously used one of those draft picks from this deal to draft Johnny Flynn instead of Stephen Curry. So some teams just aren't built for making good trades and should probably stop. And the Timberwolves are definitely one of them. I mean, it wasn't until 7 entire years later that they were able to get 32 wins in a season again. Now, if you enjoyed the video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and check out 10 win-win trades in NBA history if you haven't seen it already.